Investor, educator, and author Robert Kiyosaki has changed millions of lives all over the world. His book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, has been on the New York Times bestseller list for over 5 years. We all know that the gap between the haves and have-nots is growing, and Social Security and Medicare are in a financial mess. And just affording to live is getting expensive. So how does a person get ahead financially? The answer is raising your financial IQ and having your money work for you. Here's Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad's Guide to Wealth.
Thank you. You're very kind, thank you. If I may see a show of hands, I want to ask how many people here were born prior to or before 1964? Please raise your hands. Good, thank you. And how many were born after 1964? Please raise your hands. Good, thank you. The baby boom generation and old guys like me, thank you, young people, for paying for my retirement. I really appreciate it. How many people in this room realize that Social Security and Medicare are kind of in trouble? Good. How many people are not really going to count on it for you? Good, thank you. That's a wise decision. How many people realize that corporate pensions, such as those of General Motors and United Airlines, are in trouble also? Good, thank you. So I want to thank PBS, first of all, for having the courage to have me come on and present Rich Dad's Guide to Wealth, very simply because what you will find out, there are many people in the financial services industry that do not want me to tell you what I'm about to tell you tonight. So, please be aware of that. Also, I want to caution you this. If some of you, what I may say tonight may threaten or challenge some of your beliefs about money. I mean, how many were taught, to save money, for example? Good. Tonight you're going to find out why that's a bad idea. So that's what this program is going to shake some of you and all this, so stay tuned. I promise if you stay tuned, at minimum your financial IQ will go up. You may learn to take more control of your money and possibly survive the financial hurricane that's going to start brewing in the year 2008, the first of approximately 75 million baby boomers begin to retire. And how many people realize those baby boomers may not have enough money to retire on? Good, and good. That's why I thank you young people, because it'll be up to you to take care of us. So, before I begin, I ask a question. How many of you have already read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Thank you. Who has not yet read the book? Good, there's some of you. For those that haven't read the book, it's good to see some customers still out there and haven't read about my book. But anyway, for those that haven't read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I'll give you a little bit of my background. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a true story about my two dads. My real dad was the head of education for the state of Hawaii. Very smart, hardworking, great guy. He's a PhD, and he also ran for lieutenant governor of the state of Hawaii. So he's a great man. But I call him my poor dad very simply because even though he was a high-paid government official, no matter how much money he made, he was broke at the end of every month, and he ultimately died broke. So obviously money doesn't make you rich or poor. It's really education that does. And as you can tell, I'm fourth generation Japanese American, which means I don't speak Japanese, and I'm going to let you know that now. I barely speak English. My rich dad, on the other hand, was my best friend's father, and although he was a man who started with nothing, he ultimately became one of the richest men in Hawaii. So when you look at the white sands and the blue waters and the tall palm trees and the hula girls and the tall hotels right on Waikiki Beach, my rich dad's family owned some of the land under those hotels. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad, this book here, is a very simple, true story of what two fathers told two sons, my best friend and I, about the subject of money starting at the age of 9. And I believe one of the reasons the book has been so successful, it is written for 9-year-olds. And it's simple enough for everybody to understand high finance, or more importantly, why the rich are getting richer. So that's basically, my background. I grew up in Hawaii, I was educated in New York, and spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, went to Vietnam twice and all that. And then I came back and started my business career. So, next question is this. How many people have read this book, Prophecy? Good, see, there's fewer of you have read this book. And while Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a popular book, I think this is a more important book. And the reason I think Prophecy is more important, it's about a very important year. And that year was 1974. And 1974 was a year that the U.S. swung from socialism to capitalism. A very important reason for 1974, it was when a program called ERISA came out, and ERISA stands for Employee Retirement Income Security Act, and when the government's worried about your security, you know you're in trouble. But also it led to a thing called the 401k back in the 1980s. And this is a very big change in the history of our world right now. So Prophecy came out in 2002. It was not a very popular book because it was writing about the failure of these things called 401ks and pension plans and the crash of Wall Street. So this was 2002, and then in 2005, Time magazine, just in October of 2005, came out with a front page cover saying the same thing I said here in Prophecy, that there has been a big ripoff of people's pensions. And Time magazine 3 years later in 2005 says a great retirement ripoff. Millions of Americans who retire with benefits are in for a nasty surprise. How corporations are picking people's pockets with the help of Congress. And that's been going on. That's why so many people are in trouble. And then one day later, the New York Times magazine came out saying the same thing Prophecy did. And it says, we regret to inform you that you no longer have a pension. And that's why USA Today came out with a statement that said, America's greatest fear is running out of money during retirement. And that's what this program is about, is why we have this problem right now and why so many people may be financially wiped out in the financial hurricane that's hitting us, and also hopefully what you can do about it so that you may be able to save your friends and family. Unfortunately, what I'm about to say tonight will not work for everybody. As you know, life is not fair, but at least you'll have an idea of what you might be able to do on this whole thing. So, going into it really quickly is the difference between, one of the reasons people are having trouble is they don't know the difference between, I still can't spell that well, wealth and being rich. I'd like to explain really quickly that my rich dad taught me that wealth is measured in time and rich is measured in money. And really quickly, the difference here is this. A person who is, when you measure wealth, for example, let's say you have $10,000 in savings and your monthly expenses are $1,000 a month. That means you're 10 months wealthy. You will survive for 10 months. That's what it means. And the reason people are afraid of what's going to come up with them is they don't have enough wealth. They're afraid of running out of money during retirement. And what rich is trying to measure their lives in money. So what my rich dad taught me is don't worry about becoming rich, worry about becoming wealthy. And one of the reasons I was able to retire at the age of 47 was because I focused on being wealthy, not being rich. And that's a very big difference here. I thought I'd review something. I wrote a book called The Cash Flow Quadrant. I think it's one of the most important books for people who want to make changes in their lives. Because, as I said, the E stands for employee, S stands for self-employed or small business, B stands for big business like Bill Gates, and I stands for investor like Donald Trump or Warren Buffett. So, you know, my poor dad always said to me, son, go to school to get a what? Job. And he was programming me, and this is the word is program, me to be an employee. And, you know, when I talked to my mom, I said, you know, Dad, I don't want to be an employee. And my dad said, you must get a job. You must get a job. You got to have good education, good grades. Get your PhD. And, oh, my goodness. And my mom says, don't argue with your dad. You know, if you want to be rich, go to school to become a doctor, you know, an S, specialist. And I said to my mom, there's only one problem, Mom. She says, what's that? Doctors are smart. She says, you have a good point there. You know, don't be a doctor. And I talked to my rich dad, and he says, you know, Robert, are you basically lazy and incompetent? I said, yeah. I said, good, you'll do well in business. And so this here is having other people work for you, like my advisors and things like that, and this is having money work for me. And they're very different educational paths. Another thing my rich dad says, again, going to words or vocabularies, employees always say the same words, whether they're the janitor or the president of the company, the CEO, employees all say the same word. I'm looking for a safe, secure job with benefits. That's their whole attitude. And their emotion is fear. Because they don't know how to survive in the real world. They need that. They have that fear driving them. And S, self-employed, their words are, if you want it done right, do it by yourself. So these guys, the problem with them is they may own a business, but they really own a job. They cannot quit because they don't trust other people. Their emotion is trust. And a business owner is like me. I want to have the smartest people around me as much as possible because then I don't have to do that much work. And as an I want to know how to have my money work hard for me so I don't have to work hard for money. So that's why I started off as an entrepreneur. And over here, this is the beauty of real estate. For every dollar I make here, I bring it down here, and my banker will give me $9 more, as long as it's real estate, tax-free money. So I'm getting ahead faster and faster and faster, very simply because for every dollar I have here, my banker's giving me $8 or $9 to get ahead financially. Does that make sense to you guys here? Tax-free money. And if I sell a property, I'm going to do it tax-free. That's why I'm getting rich. That's why education or financial education is so important. And I think it's really silly that our school systems keep saying to you, go to school to get a safe, secure what? Job, when jobs are being exported overseas so fast right now, it's ridiculous. I mean, I think it was J.P. Morgan. They just exported another 4,700 jobs, and these are smart guys with MBAs and all. They exported it to India. So that's what's happening in the world. But the reason 1974 is so important was because when ERISA, which now was a 401k, came out, it forced these people to become investors also. And that's why this change was such an important change here. So the other part going into it is this, is that there's three basic kinds of education. One is academic. The other one is professional. So you go to school to learn reading and writing. It's very, very important. I didn't do very well here, but I did graduate. And then professional is when you become a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. And those are very important. But what I'm saying here is this: in this world, there's three types of education that's essential. I'm not saying these are not important. I'm saying they're not enough today. You need more. And the third type of education is education that's called financial education. So what this program is about is not so much about these. I said these are very important, but so is this one right now. And I've never understood why our school systems don't teach us anything about money. You ever wonder that yourself? Why? Because rich or poor, smart or not so smart, we're all going to use money. And it's because our school systems don't teach us much about money. That's the reason so many people are having problems today financially. And so I'm not blaming Wall Street or people who are financial advisors. I'm blaming our education system for not keeping up with the changes in time. So what happens because we don't have much financial education at school, we actually learn it from our families. So what happens with poor people is, you can look on the screen over here on the plasma, the poor people tell their kids that the government's going to take care of you. You should count on Social Security, and you should count on Medicare and things like this. What the middle class tells their kids is that they should have a good education, get a good high-paying job, a house, and a pension. What they are passive investors. A passive investor is somebody who turns their money over to somebody they hope and pray is an expert. The poor are non-investors. So the difference between a passive investor and an active investor, and what the rich teach their kids, what my rich dad taught me, was that I should be an entrepreneur like Bill Gates or Oprah, and I should be an active investor like Warren Buffett or Donald Trump and things like this. So in this program, what you'll be learning about is the difference between active investors and passive investors. A passive investor is a person always going around saying, I have $25,000. I have $25,000. What should I do with it? And the first thing I say, if I were you, I would keep your mouth shut, you know? Because if you go around telling people you have $25,000 and you're a moron, somebody will tell you what to do with that money, and they're going to tell you, give it to them. Does that make sense, you guys here? So that's what this program is about, is so that at least you can tell the difference between a good financial advisor and a bad one. Because if you don't know what you do with your money, somebody else does. So when we come back, I'll be teaching more about financial education and the secret words that can change your life. Thank you.
I just love the way Robert Kiyosaki shares. Make your calls. Join.
Here's Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad's Guide to Wealth.
So as a quick reminder, what we covered in the last part was in 1974, the United States changed, or the world changed actually, from socialism to capitalism. And the reason that's so important is because the world changed and shifted to a 401k or pension plans is because it forced many people who were E's and S's to become investors. Like I said, my poor dad was a very smart, good man, but he was a non-investor. There's people who are passive investors, and that's what most people are. They go to their company, they just put into their 401k, and they hope and pray that person managing their money is smarter than they are. And the third type is the active investor. Now, if you're going to be an active investor, then you have to have financial education. And one of the keys to financial education, a lot of people say, well, it takes money to make money. How many people have ever heard that statement? Well, that's absolutely not true, because you'll prove tonight it doesn't take money to get money, to make money. What it begins with is a thing called words or vocabulary. The English language has approximately 2 million words in it. And each of us as individuals, they estimate, has command of about 5,000 words. So one of the ways to start increasing your wealth and your financial ability is change your vocabulary. And one of the reasons my poor dad was poor, as a good man, he had the vocabulary of a school teacher. You know, he thought gerunds and prepositions were really important. But I've never made $1 off a gerund or a preposition yet that I know of, you know. I need the difference between EBITDA, PEs, ROIs, IRRs. That's what makes me rich. So just know that words make you rich, and I'm going to be going into right now the basis of financial education is words. And this here is a thing called the financial statement. As my rich dad often said to me, you know, this is your report card when you grow up. When you leave school, as my rich dad said, his banker has never, ever asked to see his report card yet. You know, a banker never said, say, Robert, can you tell me what college you went to? Are you an A student? Are you a B student? They never asked that. If you're a professional investor, they will ask you for something called a financial statement. If you're a non-investor or a passive investor, like a 401k, they'll ask you for a credit report. So to begin becoming rich, is you must have one of these. I mean, it's a must. These people have credit reports. These people have financial statements. There's very, very big differences here. So let's begin with words here. And one of the biggest words that people have mistaken on the wrong definition for are these words here, assets and liabilities. How many people have ever heard people say, my house is an asset? Good. That's using the wrong definition. That's the problem. So I'll give you the definition my rich dad gave me. You won't find this in the regular dictionary because it's a very simple definition, because this is the guide to wealth. A definition of an asset is something that puts money in your pocket whether you work or not. That's very simply it. Okay? So when you look at this financial statement, this is income statement and balance sheet, and there's one more form that I'm not an accountant, but basic accountancy requires. It's called the statement of cash flow. And what that shows you here is this. Assets are putting money in your pocket. So for example, I have a house, and every month, let's say I collect $100 from after paying all my expenses, the house is an asset. But if the house goes unrented, and every month is now costing me money, that same house is a what? Liability. So this is the cash flow pattern of a liability. So when a person says their house is an asset, I then ask them, I say, is that house putting money in your pocket? They say, oh, no, but it's gone up in value. That shows lack of financial intelligence or financial IQ, okay? I'm not saying don't buy a big house. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just saying don't call a liability a what? Asset. And that's the problem, is using the wrong word for the wrong thing here. Or I could have a car. If I use a car as a taxi and every month it put $1,000 in my pocket, it's an asset. But I have my BMW here and it's costing me $1,000 a month, it's a liability. So that's very simply it. So don't call asset or liabilities assets, and that's where people get in trouble. The next thing, like I said, my banker has never asked me for my report card yet, and my banker, if I'm going to borrow a lot of money from them, they want to see my financials. And what a banker is looking for is your financial IQ. They don't care how your academic IQ. They want to see how smart you are with money. And it's not that I wear nice clothes and have a nice watch and have a nice house and a nice car. A banker doesn't care, because how many people know people who are looking good but are flat broke? You know what I'm talking about here? So, and that's the big problem here. So when a banker looks at this thing, the banker is looking again at cash flow. So when a banker looks at this, let's say the person has a job, the money comes in and the money goes out. They look at that, that's a cash flow pattern of a poor person. If they don't change their pattern, they'll be poor. It is not how much money you make. It is how much money you spend is the issue here. For example, I have a doctor friend. He makes about $400,000 a year. He's very proud. He has no debts. He's one of those people that think that debt's bad, and that's really moronic. But anyway, but he makes $400,000 and he spends $400,000. So even though he makes a lot of money, he has a cash flow pattern of a what? Poor person. What the middle class generally tend to do is the first thing they want to do is have a big house, and they have a thing called a mortgage. And the different definition of mortgage comes from the French word mortier, which means death. That's what it means, So what happens, they have a mortgage, got the nice BMW or Mercedes, so they're looking good, but going broke, So when a banker, they come in with their nice suits and all this, the banker looks at it and goes, I can see your cash flow pattern is this. And this is the cash flow pattern of the middle class. It's working hard and going broke. They never get ahead. They buy big houses, they do home equity loans, and they think they're Donald Trump with real estate investors. All they got is a big house they're in debt to. A lot of people use their house as an ATM machine. Every time it goes up in value, they borrow the money out. That is really a loser's point of view there. I mean, that's not, the bankers love you because you're greatly in debt, but that's not a way to get ahead. And this is the cash flow pattern of a rich person. They have assets here. And so generally what it is they have a business, they have real estate, and they may have dividends from stocks and bonds and stuff like that, or interest. So those are assets. So oftentimes I ask people, think about it this way. If you stop working today, let's say you're married, you have a spouse, if you stop working today, how much money keeps coming in your pocket? And how much money keeps going out? All the things that are taking money out of your pocket are what? Liabilities. And anything putting money in your pocket is an asset. So the reason my wife and I could retire is very simply we have money going like this. This means we're wealthy. We don't have much in savings and all that, but every month it's hundreds of thousands of dollars going like this. And that's how you get wealthy. Just have assets that produce money every single month. When I did this program in Singapore, I asked people to raise their hand and say, would you mind telling me some of the assets you have? This woman raised her hand. She says, yes. She says, my best asset is my husband. And I said, ma'am, I'm talking about non-human, inanimate objects. She says, that's him. But he makes lots of money for me. I'm not talking about human beings. Slavery has been abolished for a while here and all this. So everybody understands the difference between assets versus liabilities, the cash flow pattern, and that's why bankers do not ask you for your what? Report card. They want to see your financial statement. If you have a good financial IQ, they'll give you lots of money. If you have a bad financial IQ, they'll give you a credit card or a home equity loan. That's the difference here. And years ago, I went to Sunday school. I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm not pushing religion on anybody. But I remember the story of the rich man. I think he had 3 sons or something like this. And he gave one son X amount of dollars, the second son X amount of talents, he called them, and then the third son talents. And the first son blew it, got rid of all his money. And he said, okay. The second son came in and said, what you did with the money? And the son said, I buried it. And then the third son multiplied it. Came back with, gave him $1,000, came back with $5,000. And at that point, the father, or whoever the guy was, took all of the money and gave it to the what? The third son, who multiplied the money. And that's what I learned in Sunday school is that, not God, but whoever does not like people who blow their money, people who just bury the money. See, the poor spend their money, the middle class bury their money, just put it in 401ks or savings. And the rich know how to multiply their money. So the real key is this, it's not so much how much income you make, but where you put your money. It's expenses. Do you expend your money this way, or this way? And that's why people who are always trying to make more money, they don't get ahead very simply because they're looking in the wrong place. It's over here. It's what do you spend your time and money on? And that's why I thank you guys for being here tonight, and those of you at home supporting public television and your education. You're spending time and hopefully some money to support your education and a great cause here. And that's really important, is how you spend your time and your money. That makes a difference. And then the third thing is this, is just to cover this thing why your house is not an asset, is when your banker says your house is an asset, your banker's not lying to you. This will explain it better, because to understand this, if you have a mortgage on a balance sheet, it must balance. So if a mortgage is your liability, it has to balance. So your same mortgage is your bank's asset. That's the difference. So that's why your banker says your house is an asset. And not saying it's not lying to you, it's just saying it's not whose asset it is. It's their asset, you know. And the way you know that, again, is assets put money in your pockets and liabilities what? Take money from your pocket. So when you look at this, money comes in, money goes out, goes in here, and comes back here. So it's taking money from your pocket and it's putting money in the bank's pocket. And that is basically, you know, why your banker says your house is an asset. And why it's very important to understand the definition of the word you're using. Don't just use a word, because if you keep saying your house is an asset when it's a liability, or you say your car is an asset when it's really a liability, and your vacation to Hawaii is an asset versus a liability, or your home equity loan is an asset, you're not going to make it. Does that make sense, you guys here? But what most people tell you is this. Repeat after me. Work hard, save money, get out of debt, invest for the long term, and diversify. How many people heard this? Okay? And the reason I bring this up here is that because around 1996, I was watching this very famous morning show, you know, that was broadcast all across the nation, and they had these nice, handsome, you know, couple who were the host and hostess, and they come and say, and today we have the financial expert of all times, and he's going to give us the financial advice for the new year. This is like 1996 or whatever it was, you know. And welcome so-and-so, and they clap, you know, and out comes a financial expert, and he goes, hi, everybody. What I recommend for this year, 1997, is work hard, save money, get out of debt. I can't even do it straight. Invest for the long term and diversify. And the host and hostess go, oh, that is so brilliant. Oh, thank you for your infinite wisdom on this. On financial, we thank you. The next year, they invite them back, same thing. And for the new year, I recommend you guys, what? Work hard, save money, get out of debt, invest for the long term, and diversify. And the host and hostess, oh, I can't believe, what a genius, what a financial genius. Give him a hand, I can't believe it. Every year, same guy, same message, same advice. They think it's brilliant. Then, after 2000, the stock market started to crash. And they bring the same expert on, and he comes on, and what does he say? What I recommend is work hard, save money, get out of debt, invest for the long term, and diversify. And the market kept crashing. And he kept giving the same advice. And this is what I want to say about that advice. Between the year 2000 and 2004, millions of small investors lost an estimated $7 to $9 trillion. At the same time, Wall Street paid some of its biggest bonuses out. And this is the advice they were giving people here. I want to say to you, this advice used to work. It doesn't work today. I'm not saying it's bad advice. I'm just saying it used to work. After 1974, it started to change. And what I'm going to be going into is how that change came about and why people are getting in trouble following this advice, especially this one here. Because you're going to find out the most risky of all investments are savings, stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. They are the riskiest of all investments. But most people think they're safe. And that's what you'll find out, and that's why I thank public television for allowing me to say what I'm going to say, because there's many people, as I said, and organizations who do not want me to tell you what I'm about to tell you, and all the little people they hire who are financial experts, but they're not really financial experts. Do you realize most of financial experts are not I's, they're really E's and S's. They're salespeople. And I'll be going into some of those differences. Okay? So I know I'm an investor very simply because I live by my income on my investments. I don't live by my commissions. And there's a very big difference there. So going into it, the reason work hard is obsolete advice is because in 1943, the U.S. government punished anybody who was an employee. After 1943 was a thing called the Current Tax Payment Act. At that point, anybody who was an employee, the government got paid first. How many of you ever opened up your paycheck and gone, what happened to my money? That was 1943. So the problem with being an employee and working hard is the more you work and the more money you make, you go up in tax brackets. So you don't get ahead. These guys here are taxed heavily. These guys have all the tax loopholes. That's why I can make a lot of money and pay zero taxes legally. The difference is I'm on this side here, but our school system teaches us to be this side. In 1986, they passed the 86 Tax Reform Act, and they taxed all doctors, lawyers, all the A students. They nailed them. And so, well, the attorneys I don't mind, but anyway. But what happened here is this, is that guys like me, the C students, we can make more money and pay less taxes than the A students, which proves there's a God somewhere. The next thing is save money. The reason save money is an obsolete idea is because in 1971, a man named President Nixon took us off what's called the gold standard or the Bretton Woods Agreement. And at that point, what happened in 1971, money turned into a currency. So what you started to save after 1971 was not money but a currency. And the problem with a currency is the government can print it faster than you can save it. And the other thing about this, if you understand economics, especially Keynesian economics, is that when you look at a dollar, a currency, let's say this is $1 and this is 40 years here, a currency is designed to go down to 5 cents over 40 years. A currency is designed to lose money so the government can keep running up debt. That's the reason. So they can print it faster than you can save it. That's the big problem with it. The next thing is this. If you look at the real stats, is this. And that's the reason I don't save money. If you look at this in the last few years, like I said, 1995 to 2005, what's happened is the dollar has gone this way, and the way you know how much is lost is gold went from $250 up to $500 in the same time. That means your dollar lost 50%. It lost 50% of its buying power. And the banks are paying you 1% interest. Tell me that's smart to save money. That's why the debtors started to win, because what was happening is this was going up and all this. And the reason this happens is for one very big, this is not the only thing. It's not just gold, because I can hear the economists going, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, I'm not saying I'm an economist. I'm saying just look at the price of gold. It takes twice as many dollars to buy the same amount today. But not only that, my father's house, which he purchased in, I think, 1965 or something, he paid $50,000 for it. And today it's worth $1.5 million. It's the same house. So it means the purchasing power of the dollar went where? Down. The house didn't go up in value. Your dollar went down. And the other thing the economists say, well, that's not really a good indicator. But look at this. In 1995, oil was about $10. Today it's $60. So that means your dollar you need $6 more to purchase the same amount of oil. And then the economists say, well, oil doesn't affect inflation. I'm going, they want you to believe that investing is risky. How many people have heard investing is risky? Good. What this section is about of this program is how risk isn't anything but lack of control. The number one difference between an active investor and a passive investor is the subject of control. So what I'm going to show you tonight is how what I do as an active investor is I want control. If I have control, I don't have any what? Risk. And that's the difference. So using a metaphor that most of us can understand, over here we have, an example of a car. Okay. Now, how many people realizing there's risk driving a car? Good. But car driving doesn't have to be risky. Like those guys want you to believe investing is risky. So some of the controls, the 6 controls a car must have, number one is a steering wheel, right? How many people would not buy a car if it had no steering wheel? Good, you know what I mean? So let me sit down here like this. So I sit down, I get in my car, and control number one I want to check on is I have a steering wheel. Control number 2, gas pedal. Now you have a gas pedal, you better have some what? Brakes. How many people have ever driven a car without brakes, you know? You don't need coffee for about 6 weeks after that. You know? And then you have a forward and reverse, gear shift like this. And the other thing you also have to have is a driver's license for driver's ed, and you have to have insurance. So if I'm driving down the road, doing a little bit too fast, I hear the bing, 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 and the cop pulls me over, a policeman pulls me over. What's the first thing a policeman asks me for? Driver's license and proof of what? Insurance. How many people would not let somebody who's uninsured drive your car? How many people would not let somebody who had no driver's ed drive your car? You know what I mean? That's stupid. But that's what investors are doing. They're actually investing in savings, stocks, bonds, mutual funds with no control. And what happens, that's like going like this. And that's why they think it's risky. Now, this is the worst part. Guess who else has no control? Your financial advisor. Your financial advisor. Diversify, diversify, diversify. Or what they do is this, is they go, I predict that, I predict this, I predict that. That's the kind of financial advice most people are getting. That's risky. That's not what I do. I want control. So, let me help get out of this wreck right now. So when I'm as an investor, I want 6 controls too. If a car has 6 controls, I want 6 controls as an investor. Control number 1, you look on the screen over here, is I want control of my income. Control number 2, expenses. 3 is asset value. 4 is liability. 5 is I want financial education or management. And 6 is I want insurance. Those are the 6 controls I want as an active investor. So when we come back, what I'm going to talk about is one of the ways to get rich is find that native genius that's well inside each and every one of us. And that's what the next section is about. Thank you very much.
Here's Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad's Guide to Wealth.
I'm going to get into a thing my rich dad talked about. It's called the game of money. And the reason we say it as a game is very simply because of this. And some of you may not be sports fans, but I love sports. In football, a game is consistent of 4 quarters. And so my rich dad said life is also, your financial life is in 4 quarters also. So if we can have it up here on the prompter, on the plasma, the game of money, we have a thing called the pregame show. Okay? And the next thing is we go into the first quarter. So age 25 is generally when most of us kind of get out of school and we sort of figure out what we're going to do. So age 25 to 35 is the first quarter. And the way we come up with this is 10 years is because our working life is generally 40 years long, 25 to 65, right? So the first quarter is 25 to 35. Then what happens, second quarter is 35 to 45. Got it? Things like this. And by then, you should be married, or if you want to be married, your career should be taking off, and you have a house, and a little bit in debt, and all this stuff. And then we go into halftime, And at that point, sometimes in our lives, it's called midlife crisis, We say, oh, my goodness, I'm not getting ahead, I'm not getting promoted, I'm not getting ahead, and a panic sets in. And then we go into the third quarter, which is 45 to 55, okay? And then ages 55 to 65 is the fourth quarter. And if you haven't acquired enough wealth, like I talked about, that's between wealth and being rich. Wealth is very simply measured in time. So we have recurring income coming in for as long as you live here. So if you don't have enough recurring income from wealth, you go into what's called overtime. And overtime means that you may be on Social Security, or as my Japanese friend say it, Social Security, because it's so. Is that if you haven't quite got it yet, overtime means, would you like that supersized? Would you like a giant-sized Coca-Cola with it or stuff like this? And then you go into what's called out of time. And I think this is why people are terrified right now of running out of money during retirement, because when you're out of time, that oftentimes your body gives up and all this. And a lot of times what people say is that you spend your health gaining wealth. And in the last few years of your life, you spend your wealth trying to hang on to your health. And they say so many people, their fortunes get wiped out in the last 2 years of their lives if they don't have enough. And as I said, the biggest problem in America is not Social Security, it's Medicare. $64 trillion in debt right now. So that's why I said I thank all of you who were born, after 1964, because you're going to be paying for all the old guys who are out of time, especially right now. Pre-game show, Paris Hilton was born, I think, with $300 million net worth. She won the game before she was born, How many people wish you were, born rich or all that kind of stuff? I always did, but I wasn't. So there are certain people who were born with a silver spoon in the mouth, and they were so fortunate. I wasn't. My wife, Kim, won her game in the first quarter of her life. She was about 35 years old when she retired. She had acquired enough wealth, enough passive income, that she never had to work again. So she won the game first quarter, and I was 47, so I won it just in the second quarter of my life. That meant I never had to work again. Not that I was rich, but I was wealthy. I had money coming in every month from my investments that I never had to work again. So then I took 2 years off, suffered my midlife crisis, and then came back. And when I was 50 years old, I wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the thing took off and a whole new career opened up. And now I'm in the fourth quarter of my life, and thank God I don't have to worry about going into overtime or out of time. Because acquiring wealth is just fun for me. I love investing. It's not frightening. It's control. I have all that. Does that make sense, you guys here? It's just fun. So my question is to you right now is, what quarter are you in? How many people are in the first quarter? Okay. How many people second quarter? How many people third quarter? Fourth quarter? Nobody's raising their hand on that one. A couple of you. And I won't ask about overtime and out of time, but the question is this. Sometime, like it or not, every single one of us needs to win the game. Regardless of who you are, we need to win the game. If we don't, we go into this part over here. So with that, I want to bring up my sweetheart, my darling, my best friend. It's almost 20 years of marriage right now, and that's my sweetheart, Kim. Kim has her own corporations. I have my own corporations. If we ever split, she's completely independent. She has control of her own life. Does that make sense, you guys here? So that's what I love about her.
When I married Robert, we got together. He had no money. And matter of fact, we celebrated when we hit zero. That's how far down we were. Robert's been talking about control, and I love to encourage women into this world of investing, because I think so many women today feel out of control when it comes to money, when it comes to their financial freedom and their financial lives. And so my passion is to educate and encourage women in the world of investing. And the reason why I'm so driven kind of comes from an incident that happened many, many years ago. And what it was is I was 14 years old, and I remember coming home from school one day, and I walked in, and there was my mom and her best friend in our dining room. And I walked in, and Mom kind of signaled me to, no, leave him alone, leave him alone. And so I walked away into the kitchen, and I listened to the conversation, and my mom's friend was very distraught. She was crying. She was upset. And it turned out that her husband was leaving her for a younger woman. And she went on and on. They'd been married for 20-some years and kept listening. And then she said something that just really hit home to me. And she said, you know, my marriage hasn't been good for many, many years, but at least I was financially taken care of. And my mom said, well, that's why you stayed? She said, I stayed because I didn't know how to take care of myself financially. So at 14 years old, I decided I was never going to be dependent on someone else for my financial well-being. And that was a decision, and that's why I'm so driven now to encourage women into this game as well. And so when Robert talks about control, I really believe that it's time that women today take control of their financial lives. I think it's crucial. I don't think it's a luxury or a good idea anymore. I think it's something that has to happen. And, you know, the times have changed, and what worked for our mothers and our grandmothers is not necessarily going to work for us and our daughters and our granddaughters. And I came across some startling statistics recently that show how much times have changed. For example, in the U.S., 47% of women over the age of 50 are single, meaning they are responsible for their financial well-being. And many of us have heard the divorce rate. 1 out of 2 marriages ends in divorce. So if she was depending on Prince Charming to take care of her, well, and who usually ends up with the children? The woman. So the woman is now responsible for herself and for her children. And the first year after a divorce, on average, a woman's standard of living drops 73%. And for any of you that are concerned about your mothers or your grandmothers, of the elderly living in poverty, 3 out of 4 are women. But the amazing thing is 80% of those women were not poor when their husbands were alive. So what the statistics are telling me is that as women, especially as we get older, we have not been prepared, we have not been educated to take care of ourselves financially, and now is the time to do that. And it doesn't take a lot. It's really just through education, and that's why I'm so happy to be part of this program on PBS, because they're all about education. And to get started in this world of investing, it takes education. Start small, make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Put a little money down. You'll be amazed at how smart you get when you put a little money down on an investment. Your education goes through the roof. So again, it's just about education. And just to let you know, it's not rocket science. I don't have a special degree. It doesn't take any special type of formal training. When I started in investing, it was in 1989, and Robert came to me, said, "It's time you start investing." And I'm like, I don't even know what the word means. And so he started to teach me what his rich dad taught him about investing. And I went out, and I'm stumbling along trying to figure it out. And finally, I came across this little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in a place called Portland, Oregon. And I signed the papers, and I got the deal, and I'm doing all my due diligence now, and I'm checking it out to see if I'm going to do it or not. And I'll tell you, I was scared to death. What if the tenant moves out? What if the plumbing breaks? What if I lose money? What if? I was scared to death. And what happened is when it came time to close the papers, to sign the papers, my hand was shaking so bad they couldn't even make out my signature. But the other thing that happened is my fist was so tightly clenched around my $5,000 check that I had to part with that they thought they'd never get it. But I did that deal, and I went on to do the next deal, and I kept learning, and I kept learning as I went. And what it came down to is today I control millions of dollars worth of real estate and worth of property. But it all came down to, it started with a little education, and it started with that first step. So I just want to say, again, I so encourage women in this game of investing. It's not difficult. It takes some time. It takes some effort. It takes some education. But the freedom, for me, when I understood this game, my self-worth went up. My confidence went up. I knew for the first time that I could take care of myself. I didn't have to depend on Robert. I didn't need Robert. I wanted Robert, but I didn't need him. And that made a huge difference. So one final statistic. Only 20%, studies show that only 20% of baby boomer women will be financially secure in retirement. That means 80% of us will not. So again, I thank you for being at this PBS show, because by being here, you're getting yourself educated, and all it takes is education and some action, and you can be easily be part of that 20% who's secure and in control. Thank you.
The last thing I want to talk about here is this, is that I realized as I studied education, I started studying education at a later time when I was about 38 years old. And I realized that each and every one of us was a genius, except in school. There are certain people, like I had a classmate who was considered a genius in school. This guy could do quantum physics and all that when he was in kindergarten. The trouble is he couldn't tie his shoelaces. How many people knew people like that? They're absolute, and they are geniuses in school, but in the real world, they're incompetent. This guy didn't know his left hand from his right hand. We used to play baseball, and I said, how can he be a genius? He doesn't know. He could never figure out what the glove went in his left hand or his right hand. but he was a genius. You know, I said, how can he be a genius? He can't pitch, can't bat, you know, it's like this. So I started to realize that genius, that every one of us had it. And what genius stands for is this here. The genie, the magic. And so what I say to this is this. You know, God created every animal on earth, every species, to have a special advantage. For instance, birds can fly, cheetahs run fast, and cockroaches, you can't kill them. You know? So if animals have special advantages, so does each and every one of us. For example, Tiger Woods is a genius in the environment called the golf course. Tiger Woods would not be a genius as a jockey. He's just too big. I would definitely not be a jockey, you know what I mean, like this? And you look at Mick Jagger. He went to school to be an accountant, but he became a billionaire as a Rolling Stone. The thing I want to leave you with tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is have the courage to find that environment, like Tiger Woods on the golf course, Mick Jagger as a Rolling Stone, Oprah in front of television. Find that spot where your genius comes out. That's what intelligence is. My genius was crushed in school. I was labeled stupid and dyslexic and no attention and jumping around all the time. Also, my genius did not come out in the corporate world. I do not like being told what to do and kissing you-know-what to get the corporate ladder. I do not do that stuff well. I do well on the streets. Does that make sense, you guys here? That's where my genius came out. And the other thing is that I flunked out of school twice because I could not write. And I do not read that well yet. But only, you know, no, it's true. I flunked when I was 15 and I flunked out when I was 17. And today I have one of the top 3 books in the history of the New York Times. I've been on the New York Times bestseller list for over 5 years now. Only 2 books have beat me. One of them is The Joy of Sex. That might take a while to beat. So when I flunked out of school, you know, and now I have a New York Times bestseller for 5 years, I'm still a lousy writer. People say, you can't write. I say, you sound like my English teacher. You know, I did graduate. I have a Bachelor of Science degree and all that. I went to a very prestigious school here in New York. But the point here is this, that's not, you have to find where your genius comes out. That make sense, you guys here? And after I flunked out of school and then this book became, I was scarred for the longest time. I really thought I was stupid. It pained me. Here's my father, the superintendent of education, and his son's a moron. You know what I mean? It's all this. So what I'm thinking about, if those school teachers are still alive, I'm going to look them up on 1-800-SEARCH or something. I'm going to find their names. I'm going to mail them a copy of my book, page by page, say, here it is. But the point here is this, I didn't find what I was good at until I had the courage to find the environment where my genius came out. Does that make sense, you guys here? And I ask you to do that. Intelligence is don't do as you're told. Go where you know your genius can come out. It's not easy. Tiger Woods practices like a wild man to get his genius to come out. I practice I write like crazy. I'm not a good writer. Does that make sense, you guys here? It's not easy. If you think it's easy, this is not it. But you and every one of you at home, you need to find, or I recommend finding where your genius lies. What environment do you come the best in? Because if you look at this picture over here of this young boy, I think this is really it. That's really what it is. Every child is born with a genius. I did not know when I was 9 years old playing Monopoly that I was seeing the future. When I played Monopoly, I saw that I could become a rich man. Whereas my poor dad kept saying, go back to school. So I'd like to leave you with this. Have the courage to find that environment. See, the magic lamp is your environment. Tiger Woods, golf course. Mick Jagger, Rolling Stone. Oprah, television. Have the courage to find that environment where you rub the magic lamp and your genius comes out. The most important thing is do what you know God gave you the best genius for. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.